Hey, what's going on, everybody? David Noe with SpeakEasy HR, presented by Payroll Partners. It is April 14th. We're at episode 30. Cannot wait. We're at episode 30, and I have an amazing guest for you today on the show, and we have so much to get into. I have a lot of questions for this guest, but Dr. Melanie Peacock, welcome to SpeakEasy HR.
Thank you, David. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I have. We've talked for several months, and so it's been great to connect with you and hear more about your background and your book, which we'll get into. So, if you are watching live on YouTube or LinkedIn, you can comment and question Dr. Peacock as we go through. So, any questions that come up, please add them to the chat. But again, if you are new to SpeakEasy HR, my name is David Noe. I started this last year, and it's been just such an amazing journey of creating a podcast, editing, producing, creating new guest speakers every time. So it's been a lot of fun. We get into fun topics, easy topics, difficult topics. And this one today is bringing creativity into the world of HR. So we'll get into that a little bit, but we definitely have the world famous envelope icebreaker game to bring up and play that. So for those who do not know you, Dr. Peacock, if you want to just kind of explain your background a little bit and kind of what led you into writing and doing so much in HR and being at different universities, and you live in Calgary, is that correct?
Correct.
So yeah, just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself.
So how many hours do we have, David? Oh, no, wait, that's not the purpose of the
You can
podcast.
go as long as you want.
No. Look, it's just such a pleasure to be here and talk about creativity. My goodness, the work that you do. And thank you so much for all that you bring to our community and to advancing these important discussions. I love when you say we're going to talk about the easy and not so easy. And this is a perfect example of the topic. So just really quickly, people want to hear us chat, and I love to hear comments. Hello, somebody's saying hello in the chat, and I'd love to hear from people. Please enter your questions and your comments and ideas. But really, it's been a lovely journey. I feel so blessed in my career. I want to say, I knew exactly what I was doing when I entered it into HR. I didn't, it was a calling. People say that sometimes. I like to say it was a calling, but they called the wrong number, but I answered anyway. And then I wouldn't let them off the hook.
Yeah.
And, it's just been an amazing journey. I worked in oil and gas, as a lot of people in Alberta would have done. I worked in telecommunications. I then was teaching part-time, sort of fell into that. And then it became my full-time passion and my full-time career. So yes, I taught in various post-secondary institutions for over 20 years. So in other words, I'm not old, I'm seasoned, as I like to say. And teaching, what a joy, like just what a blessing to be able to share knowledge, to build and work with the future practitioners in HR. But it also gave me the opportunity to write. I've written several textbooks. I've written a textbook on change management specifically for HR professionals. And I'm currently working on another textbook. It also gave me the opportunity to go out and speak. And I used to laugh, David. I said, oh my gosh, people will pay me to come and speak. I said, some people will pay me to shut up. But now I get paid to come and speak and share my passion and my knowledge for HR. Also, I always made sure to keep my feet in what was happening in the real world. So by doing that, I would do a couple of contracts through my consulting business a year, always focusing primarily on teaching. But now that I'm not teaching full-time anymore, by choice, I'm really focusing on my consulting. And, I've always described myself, David, as a pragmatic academic. And by that, I mean, I love theory, I love research, I love concepts. But what's so important to me is, what do we do with that?
Yeah.
I always used to say, if I had a t-shirt, it would say, so what? Like, what do we do with this information? How do we make it usable? How do we make it make a difference?
Absolutely. No, that's great. And I always ask people how they get into HR, and some people, my previous guest had talked about, her family was in HR, and she was 6 years old and she was acting like she was in an HR role. It was so funny to hear. Like I've never heard someone, say that about just working in HR and how you stumble into it. And a lot of people just don't wake up, when they're in 6th grade and say, I want to work in HR. It just doesn't happen, or payroll or any of that. So for those who are listening and maybe have started in their HR career and they're, 2 or 3 years in, what and kind of everything that you have seen, just to start out with this question, what advice would you give somebody in HR?
So the first advice I would give anybody is don't listen to any advice. You because there's the dreaded question where people often say, I've sat on different panels, and if you could go back and give your 20-year-old self some advice. And I always tell people, if I could really, if there was a time machine, or if I could send my 20-year-old self some advice, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Because the mistakes I've made or the paths I've taken were based on what I didn't know.
Yeah.
And who would you be without your story?
Right.
Part of the adventure, part of the creativity of a career, of life itself, is just embracing that uncertainty.
Yeah.
And all jokes aside, though, I do value advice. Today's episode has been brought to you by cliches, because another saying that I really like, and I say it a lot professionally and personally, is if you want to know the road ahead, ask someone who's on the path back. And I've done that for career advice, for relationship advice, for parenting advice. There is value in it, right? And then you take what you hear, but you make it work for yourself. You can't just say, oh, that's what I'm going to do then. So my advice would be to embrace the unknown, to be bold, to ask a lot of questions, and good questions, though. The question shouldn't be, when's lunch? When do I get my first vacation? Those aren't the kind of, right? But to be curious.
Yeah.
And not to just be interesting, but to be interested.
Yeah.
And that's the best advice I can give anybody, and I still love that. You talked about going back to your first question. No, unlike your previous guest, I didn't know what HR was when I was younger. I probably couldn't have even spelt it. HR, how do you spell that? But I was always a curious child.
Yeah.
And I was most curious about what people did for work.
Mm-hmm.
I would meet adults and I would say, what do you do? And what does that mean? And then you're like, oh my God, I'm being interviewed by a 6-year-old. Where do you work? What's your office like? What do people? And I was always fascinated by the world of work. And that has not, all these years later, that has not left me.
Yeah.
And so that's my last piece of advice, is just be fascinated and be fascinated about what's happening around us in the world of work.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Very good. Well, we're going to shift gears a little bit and play the world famous envelope icebreaker game to just hear 1 or 2 questions to hear more about how you would answer these. So let me shift this over to the awesome envelope icebreaker game for those who have not seen this before. Hopefully it'll play here. Come on. I don't know if it's going to go. There we go. All right. 1 through 15. Have a number.
Number 3. En deux, trois.
Number 3. There we go. All right. Number 3 is, and the Oscar goes to, no. What was your first job that you earned a paycheck with taxes deducted?
So I worked for a restaurant that no longer exists, because this was many years ago, called Mr. John's. And we had these lovely spandexy orange uniforms we had to wear. Really fashion forward, let me tell you. But working in the hospitality, working as a server was tremendous experience. And I often joke, I say, everybody should work in some type of service industry. We could argue that with HR, we are in a service industry of a different sort, but in hospitality, you really gain an understanding for dealing with a customer, trying to listen to them. What are their needs? What are their wants? Also understanding too, that some of the things they get frustrated with you aren't really anything you've done. I
Right.
didn't change the menu. I didn't choose to charge this, but you have to learn how to listen, not pass the blame, but know who to take the concerns to,
Yep.
resolve issues. Uh, it was a great experience. It also helped me realize I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. I call that my stay in school job, right?
Yep.
It made me realize, okay, this is good. And I have so much respect for people who do this as a career, no disrespect intended. But
Yep.
for me, I couldn't do it. We all have our
Yeah.
strengths and weaknesses. And I knew if I wanted to do something different, then I had to do things differently.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. All right. One more number.
4. Let's just go in order.
4. All right. Number 4. I like that. All right. What is your absolute dream job?
I'm doing it. I'm living the dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say that I am so blessed and so fortunate.
Yeah.
My dream job would be to teach. Again, we're going to go full circle in the conversation. You talked about when you were younger, what did you envision? When I was younger, I used to, with my teddy bears, play banker. I used to be fascinated going to the bank. And I worked in banking in
Yeah.
early stages of my career. And then I used to teach them. So I used to pretend I was a teacher. And I ended up as a teacher. And I view, by the way, everything we all do in HR, in management, in business, we are all teaching in one way or another.
Yeah.
But I actually got to be a teacher, like a formal teacher.
Yeah.
And the other thing I used to love to do as a child was I used to love to write stories. And I said, I want to write stories.
Yeah.
And yes, so I've written academic stories, but of course now, as you've in your kind introduction mentioned, I've also written my first work of fiction. So I am actually living the dream.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's awesome. Well, good. Well, I want to shift into the topic a little bit now. And before we get to that, I do want to bring up for people that are watching live, this is going to be while we are live for this amazing offer from Dr. Peacock. So we're going to get into her book, HR Can Be Murder. If you haven't read it, if you haven't bought it, which you can find it on Amazon, but this is going to be a way for us to give back to the people that are watching live. So if you mention in the chat, in the comment section, the word mystery, I'm going to put your name into a drawing. And at the end, you don't have to be watching live at the end, but you obviously have to put your name in the comment section during this hour show, and you will be put into a drawing for 30 days of free access to her book. So there it is. It's out there. If you are watching live, which we do have some people watching live, I can tell on the ticker on my phone. So definitely comment in the section, add in the comment section the word mystery, and you will get added to that contest. So 1 minute commercial from our presenting sponsor, Payroll Partners, and then we are going to dive into this awesome topic with Dr. Peacock. So 1 minute, and we'll be on the other side here.
Finding a new employee takes time and money. For one position on a single job board, you could easily spend a minimum of $5 to $10 a day advertising a job post. It's worth noting that the average time it takes to hire a new employee is 36 days. However, it can take longer than that. You could find yourself paying hundreds of dollars a month for a single job board. And if you're using multiple job boards for multiple positions, this could add up to thousands of dollars a month. There is a much simpler and more affordable way of finding the right candidate. At Payroll Partners, we offer an applicant tracking system to help manage your hiring process. Our ATS is customizable, allowing you to decide which days you want to run the job and when to close it so you don't break the bank. And this feature lets you e-blast your network, posting jobs on multiple boards at once, all managed in one location. Payroll Partners, elevating your payroll and HR experience.
So if you are in a position where you have to decide payroll technology, HR technology in your business, and you are frustrated, have pain points, and you want to just explore elsewhere, look us up, get in touch with me on LinkedIn, and would love to explore options with you. Small size businesses, large size businesses, we work with a wide variety. So, all right. So I have not seen anybody other than this LinkedIn user which I do not see their name. So you will be difficult to add you to the contest. So if you are watching, I just need to know your name. So absolutely put your name out there. All right. So Dr. Peacock, when I came to you and said, "Do you want to be on the podcast?" You said absolutely, and I said, "What topic do you want to bring to the show in your work?" And it was creativity in HR, shattering policies and procedures. So, how have you embraced creativity in your work? And obviously you're writing, and now it's generated a book that's almost been out a year now, right? It was June of last year that came out. So how have you embraced creativity?
Yeah, it's a difficult topic sometimes to think about. How can you embrace creativity? It's like, let's be spontaneously, let me try that again. Let's plan to be spontaneous, right? It's like you telling someone to be creative. Well, that sounds forced. So the first thing I would say, oh, LinkedIn user is our friend JP. We know Jake. We know Jeff. There we go.
Yeah, Jeff.
Yay! And
That's awesome.
remember, yes, put the word mystery in, everybody. We can't let Jeff be the only one in.
Yeah, Jeff can't win.
That's right. Jeff's already a winner in our books. So to embrace creativity, the first thing I'll say is you need the opportunity to be still. We are so often rushed and doing so many things. It is hard to be creative when we don't have a moment to pause and to think. And as we explore this topic specifically as how it relates to HR, I'm sure all of, everybody who's joined us today, and thank you for taking the time to do that. Or if you're listening after the fact, I appreciate it. But it's hard to find the time, right? We've got so many demands on our schedule. And the quick version of that is, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, I had an accident which forced me to be still. Like I was immobilized for a while. And because of that, I was able to do a lot of reading that I hadn't done in a long time, like non-academic reading as well as academic reading. But that also allowed me to go, well, wait a minute, isn't this something I've always wanted to do? I had to get in touch with what are some of my dreams, my visions, my desire to write. And I went, oh yeah, I think I've always wanted to write a murder mystery. So I got in touch with my creativity by being still and allowing it to envelop me almost. It wasn't that I went out and sought it. It came to me when I found the moments to be still and silent and actually had that time to think. David, I often joke, people ask me, would you ever do another PhD? Or are you happy you did your PhD? And I normally don't even let them finish the sentence. And it's like, no, oh no, I never do it again. But am I glad I did it? Absolutely. But one of the best parts, there's many good parts, but one of the great parts of doing advanced education is that as well forced me to find time to think.
Yeah.
Right? You have to find time to think if you're going to actually write and create something. And so I've heard so many great tips about journaling in the morning, doing your yoga, doing your morning meditation, doing some type of exercise, deep breathing, whatever works for you. I won't say that there's one way to do that. Other than the tip I would leave is to allow time to be thoughtful, still, and then you build on what you know. Originally when I was writing HR Can Be Murder, it was a murder mystery, and I was writing down ideas, and it just sort of flowed for me, but it wasn't HR focused. But what happened as I was writing it is I went, oh, I think I'm going to make the protagonist to be a young woman starting out in her HR career. And then what happened as it evolved from me is HR themes and all of my experience in my 30 plus years of HR came out through the book, including, as I shared with you earlier, just coincidentally, the criticality of payroll and how payroll is important. The criticality of appropriately hiring. We looked at the commercial you just played. That's another theme that came through the book. The importance of onboarding. The importance of being in touch with what your employees need, policies and procedures, how that was another important theme in the book. And, what happened after all of that, David, is HR professionals that have read it, and thank you to the community for your support, have said it was so great because it re-engaged us with the importance of our profession, all while I got to read a cozy murder mystery. Because hopefully, while you could relate to what's in the book, none of us will ever experience a coworker actually being killed, other than with kindness. And then other people said to me, I want non-HR people to read it. And I said, yeah, that was one of my goals too,
Yeah.
is because someone who then reads it goes, okay, I enjoyed a murder mystery and I got to guess and try and figure out, I figure out who the murderer is?
Yeah.
But I also, oh my gosh, I never realized how strategic and how important HR is. And that wasn't the purpose of the book, right? It's not a read this and you'll understand about HR. But it comes through in many different ways throughout the book.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And for those who have not seen it or have heard of HR Can Be Murder, I definitely want you to get it on Amazon or mention the word mystery. Let's make sure Jeff is in some kind of contest with other people because he's the only one that has commented so far. So all you gotta do is go in the chat, mention the word mystery, and we'll add you into that random drawing at the end of the show. So it's been out for about a year now, and I think, as it relates to some of the work that you've done on the academic side with your jobs as associate professor and working with the University of Calgary, how have you seen HR, with when it comes to rules and compliance? How do you take that and use creativity in today's workplace when it comes to HR professionals?
Yeah, so we are a heavily compliant profession. And,
Yep.
and there's a place for that. So I don't want anyone listening to think, oh my gosh, she's gone off the rails. It's happened. She's lost it. She's finally lost it. Because, of course, one of the things we need to do as good HR professionals is be very familiar with legislative requirements.
Mhm.
There are boundaries and there are things that we have to follow and rules and regulations. And that's all very, very important. But then we get into guidelines. And this is where we get into the gray. And to understand that, why are we setting these guidelines? Why are we setting these policies? What is the intent? To step back and always say, okay, why? Why do we have a dress code policy? Like, what is it that we're trying to control, for the lack of a better word? Why do we have a training policy? Thou will have X number of days of training per year and thou will like it. Whether you will go and you will enjoy it, whether you don't enjoy it. Like, what's the purpose? What's the intent? And that's a really good strategic role for HR people to have, is, yes, understand the regulations, the rules, the legislation. But so many of our policies and procedures, particularly the procedures, are set more with intentions that are either outdated or we don't even know why we have those.
So which policy or which policies do you think people should look at and see if they're outdated and maybe need to be reimagined or recreated?
So I'm going to pick one for the ease of timing. And, not an easy subject. We said we're going to deal with easy and not so easy. I would invite people to look at their bereavement policies.
Yeah.
We're not comfortable at all, particularly in North America. I hope we have people listening later or joining us now from all over the globe, but particularly in North America, we're not comfortable discussing the end of life. We're not comfortable dealing with people as they're dealing with their own or going through their own bereavement and grief. And so to put something in a policy, it just makes it so much easier. Okay, this happens. This is how we define your family, first of all. And
yes,
and then you get 3 days, tough tootie if you're not over it by then. And you better have that 3 days of grief immediately after the incident. Right? It's interesting how now, again, I've talked to so many clients and they'll say, well, we can't just open it up because people will take advantage of things like that. And my question back is, will they?
Yeah.
Will they? And, I've found overall, if you give to your employees, there's always going to be somebody out there ready to take advantage of something. But 99%, even higher, will not. And the more you give, the more you get back. So let me give you a really silly example. It might be silly, but to me, it's still very meaningful. Of course, as an academic, we had strict rules and policies we had to follow. If somebody couldn't write an exam on time or couldn't hand in a paper because they've experienced a loss, they had to come in with a copy of the funeral program or the death certificate. Okay, I get there was reasons why they needed some kind of evidentiary proof.
Yeah.
But I had a student who was an amazing student, and he, had been in many of my classes over his 4-year program. Was in his senior year, comes into my office one day as we're getting ready to hand in a major project. And it was obvious to me he had been crying. He was distraught. And he says, Melanie, he says, I don't know how to tell you this. He says, you're going to just have to send me out of your office and say that I know. He said, there's nothing you can do. He said, but my dog died. And I said, sit down. And we chatted. And he said, talk to me about Tucker. I still remember the discussion about Tucker. I remember the dog's name. He said, Tucker was with us for 17 years and blah, 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 blah. He says, look, I even brought you. He says, here, I showed you the thing from the vet. He said, but I know there's nothing you can do. And I said, of course, there's something I can do. I have discretion within policy. And you don't have to hand in your paper this week. We'll figure something else out. How much time do you think you'll need? Another 5 days, 3 days? I said, let's say 5. And if you're not ready in 5, let me know. Guess what? His paper was in 3 days. But he came back to me afterwards and said, your kindness and your understanding. He said, I told my family they couldn't believe it. But again, I had the leeway within the policy to say, this is an exception. Now, if somebody comes in and tells me my goldfish that I owned for 3 days died, I can't remember. Well, I might be a little less inclined, but who knows? Maybe you have to use some judgment.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's what I'm talking about. And bereavement policies are one of the things I would invite our guests, our listeners, to have a look at that one and think it through.
Yeah, and I've had situations that stick out to me when it comes to bereavement. Just in my role in HR for the last 15 plus years, I've had to help employees with some really difficult situations. Their parents have passed away. They've been their caregiver. They've been diagnosed with cancer, and they've had to go through that whole process of losing a family member like that, or a sister or a brother. I did have one person make up an obituary and send it, and we found out that it was fake because she wanted to take off work. Now that does happen. So that 99% of the time when you said people don't really try to take advantage, it does happen. And I've seen someone try to go very creative and make a fake obituary, which I'm not making that up. It did happen. So
look, the truth is stranger than fiction. I had a student fake an auto accident, to try. If they spent as much time doing the work as they did forging documentation. But again, it's should we let one bad apple spoil the lot?
Yeah.
And, I like what Jeff's put in the comments, the 5 whys, asking why 5 times. Why do we have this? And beyond what is the intent?
Right. Exactly.
What is the purpose?
Yep. Absolutely.
So bravo, Jeff.
Yes. Thank you, Jeff. Keep the comments coming. And if you are watching live on LinkedIn or YouTube, comment, ask questions along the way that we go through. So you've talked about policies, and you gave one to maybe help consider reimagining or reconsidering the policy for someone involved in creating policies and changing them. So some leaders do fear that too much creativity in HR, can lead to non-compliance issues and things like that. So how do we strike the right balance between structure and innovation?
So 2 ways I would see to respond to that, David, 2 elements that are needed. One, you need to go in and show that you've done your work and your research. So you know what the base level is. So whenever I've worked with clients, when I was working and I would go to the senior executive or the C-suite, or when I deal with my students, I would come in with an idea, but I would say, so these are the requirements. This is how we have to pay someone. This is how we have to administer vacation pay. This is how we have to do health and safety issues. So you've shown that you've thought of the baseline, that you're not just coming in and going, Yippee, let's go. Right? You've done your research. You're coming in as an expert and with some knowledge. Then I follow that up with data. Why am I suggesting a change or that we offer more than the legal requirement? These are the costs involved. This is what employee surveys are telling us. This is what's happening with turnover and the survey. The exit interviews are showing us this is why people are leaving. This is what research will show us are the benefits of offering more. Here's an example of 4 companies in a similar industry that have done more and what's happened to them. So again, baseline, understanding, very pragmatic, and then data to support any change.
Yep. And I see that with businesses that don't have it figured out, that might have a one HR, an HR department of one, and they're trying to help shape the future for the organization. They're trying to give suggestions and recommendations, and the more that you can approach those situations with your advice, I think will go a long way, because if you can prove and show data and back that up with, here's the why, here's what we can do with this, and this is why it will impact us as a business, it's going to make that HR professional stand out in so many ways, and just get a seat at the table with the leadership and really help them understand, like, this is why I want to enforce these kinds of things in my HR role, because it's going to help us in all these different ways. So I think that's great. So how can HR leaders go beyond the policies, right, and focus on people-driven solutions without compromising, like, being fair and consistent and all that stuff that a lot of people try to, do in their HR job?
I want to share with you, David, a quote that I can't even remember who shared it with me. It's been so many years ago, but it's always stuck with me. To me, it's one of these profound, profound statements. To treat people fairly, you have to treat them differently. I'm going to say that again. I really want everyone listening in. To treat people fairly, you have to treat them differently. And that is really, wow, that makes my little wee HR brain go, wow, what is it? So let me give you an example. Back to the student who came in and said, my dog passed away. Blah, blah. Okay, I gave them an extension. An hour later, a student comes in and says, my snail passed away. And because they heard, oh, you gave John an extension. Here I am, Jill, I want an extension. And I say no to Jill. Oh my gosh, that's not fair. Right? But to me, that is fair, because it's very different circumstances, situations, judgment. Okay, so to treat people fairly, you have to treat them differently. How do we make that work in HR, though? Especially when we want to policize. Is that a word?
Right.
Did I invent it? When we want to make everything into a policy and a procedure, right? Because then we don't have to use our judgment. We can just say, no. The policy says it's only if, family isn't a dog. I don't have to take any responsibility. I can just say no.
Yep.
We do this by being transparent about our decision making. So, for example, I worked with a client who said, I want to make. They use the word make. And I said, first of all, let's not use the word make. I want to ask. I want to request. I want to even, enforce. These are such bad words. Anyway, I want XXX number of people to be back on site fully. And, because blah, blah, blah. But other people, I think, could work remotely all the time, part of the time. But I can't do that because it'll cause chaos. It's not fair. So I'm going to put a policy together that everybody has to be back on site full time. So I said, so let's explore that a lot. And I asked a lot of questions back to the whys. Thank you, Jeff. And as we fleshed that out, there was sound business reasoning. Notice I'm saying it's not a whim. It's using sound business reasoning and decision-making and data, why some positions could be fully remote.
Yep.
Others could be partially, and others needed to be on site. And I said, so let people know. If you tell people why you made a decision, not everybody's going to like it. I'm not living in some Disney fairyland here. I get it. You're never going to make everybody happy, or maybe you can. But if you're transparent and you communicate authentically and often and honestly, that's how you could treat people differently and treat them fairly.
Yeah. I love that. It's definitely I'm thinking of how I can do that, right? And as you're explaining that, because one thing when I was starting out in HR, it was kind of like I wanted to do everything for people to like HR and to come to us or me and make it fair. And anything I did, there was always somebody that would complain or create some kind of, negative energy around this whole thing. And it was just so frustrating. And over time, I realized that that's just, unfortunately, that's the way it is. Like you can be fair, you can be consistent, you can treat people differently, like you said. And, if they have situations with their dog or whatever, which I saw your dog jump off the couch over there.
There he is.
He
He
must
heard.
have,
He said,
he left. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely different for everybody's situation. So you really just have to see, and find out when you are looking at your organization and your role in HR or whatever it might be, and how you can apply some of your advice. So uh, Jeff said some organizations need to understand that one size does not fit all. We can be more successful by treating our employees fairly rather than equally. Yep. People first. I've heard
I
that.
call that pantyhose policies. One size does not fit all, everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So in your experience, what's the biggest mind shift HR professionals need to make to embrace more creativity in their jobs?
So the first mind shift I would say is we are role models. Employees look up to us more than we
Yeah.
think. We get a lot of the complaints. Yeah, I'm sure we've all heard it. We've been called the no fun police, right? We're the ones that making all this thing happen. Okay. So we can role model behavior.
Right.
And I would know when I deal with clients, when I deal with C-suite, I ask a lot of questions. Again, this is coming very full circle in our discussion, right? That I do ask a lot of questions. Respectfully, diplomatically, but I'm not afraid to ask questions. And then employees see that they see that I'm willing to challenge the status quo and that it's okay to do so in the right way. Doesn't necessarily mean that what I ask or what I request I'm going to get.
Right.
And I let them know that too. Yeah, I tried to implement such and such a policy or a procedure or an initiative.
Yep.
Didn't happen. And they had good reason to say no. And so I share that. But the fact that I even asked and I'm okay with when it doesn't come to fruition, or when it does, right? That people do look to us as a little bit of a beacon in the organization.
Yeah.
That they are watching what we do.
Yeah.
The other thing too that I think the mindset has to shift, and we have to get employees to shift this mindset. And again, spoiler alert, it's a theme in the book, it's a theme in HR Can Be Murder, is that HR does not invent these policies. We are not sitting behind some closed door with the dog on the other side going, what can I do to mess things up today? My pretties, you think the real definition of wicked is the HR department. No, what HR is doing is taking management, senior leadership's direction and ideas and implementing them, making them actionable. Okay, you need this. How do we make it so? But it's management, senior leaders' responsibility. If you don't like the bereavement policy, HR didn't sit there and invent it. We took direction from management. Hopefully, though, this is where we come in and offer our advice, our sage advice, our counsel. This is the law. What can we do that's more? Why? When? When can we allow people to have discretion and guidelines? This is what HR should be pushing for. Like, how many times have you, David, been in a store where you're dealing with a customer service person and they're like, no, I can't do that. I have to go ask a manager. I can't give you your $3.31 back. Let's see, Canadian, how much would that be US? You know what I mean? Like if we give people, and think about what it does when it empowers employees too. One of the things that stuck with me early in my career, and this is what, when you asked about a topic, I was working for an oil and gas company. And because of my finance background in my HR, I was also responsible for all of the employee relocations, and we moved people a lot across the country into the United States and across Canada. That's when things were a little different. Anywho, and so I would work with, we had policies, right? This is what we'll pay for. This is how many, like, oh, to a T, right? But they were policies, like, and one of the senior vice presidents who we were moving from the States to Canada called me one day and said, okay, so my wife says true story. My wife wants these kind of drapes, blah, 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 but this is so it's $51, blah, 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 more than, so I don't know what to do. And then I need this. And he went through a list of things. And I said, well, you're a senior vice president in this company. If you feel that this is what's going to make your move smoother, run it by your boss. And if they say, okay, then it's not up to me. And he's like, well, that's refreshing. I thought you as the HR person were going to say, oh, the policy says. I said, yeah, there's a reason for the policy so that people understand and have parameters. But you've outlined, just in our 10-minute conversation, you've outlined to me very solid business reasons why, no, sorry, happy wife, happy life, happy spouse, happy house. It's like I like to say, we don't have to now. It could be the woman moving and the husband, right? We got to think about this. This is a bigger business decision.
Yeah.
And so there's a minute example, but it really stuck with me.
If you are watching live, you can put in the word mystery in the comments section and go into a drawing for 30 days of access to HR Can Be Murder by Dr. Melanie Peacock. So if you haven't read her book, obviously you can find it on Amazon, but if you want to get 30 days of free access, just go in the comments section and type in the word mystery. Okay, so as we shift in the future with HR and workplace innovation, as the workplace evolves, it's constantly evolving. How do you see HR adapting to the new and more flexible ways of working?
So the cliche answer here would be, of course, we have to get more adept at using technology and particularly AI.
Yep.
As I'm learning more and more about AI, David, artificial intelligence, and I'm even guilty of it. We use it as a blanket term, but there's so many different ways that we can incorporate and utilize artificial intelligence into our work.
Yep.
And another part of this creativity, though, is understanding, and this is a blessing, right? That human beings can be so creative. Hey, we got another mystery. Yay, thank you. That we use the technology, but it's only based on what it knows and what's been programmed in there. Whereas as human beings, we have so much programmed in here that we don't even begin to understand. And so as much as I say we need to use the technology, we also have to have the checks and balances. We have to have the people involved. We have to have the ethical considerations. And again, how do you have that in a policy? That's why I said we have to be creative. We have to be able to embrace a little bit of uncertainty and creativity, because there aren't going to be answers that we can always have in a policy or procedure, particularly when it comes with technology. We have to have the ability to go, I think that's, here's my technical word, everybody write it down. I think that's hanky. It's something sus, as the kids would say. And then my kids would say, no one says that anymore, Mom. Okay, it's sus, it's hanky, right? Like the machine isn't going to tell you that, but you as a creative individual are going to go, just because the policy says that the system should write the job description, I'm going to say, in this case, no. No soup for you, no job description for you. I'm going to do it. Those are the kind of things where we can use the technology, but still embrace that creativity to go, okay, policy says to do this. I think this time we need to move beyond it.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you haven't watched or listened to the previous episodes with Kendra Ramirez, Tim Sackett on AI, I would go back and listen to those episodes. Those were great episodes on AI. So again, if you want to learn and how those professionals have adapted in HR and are asking the right questions with AI, go back and listen to those episodes. So we did have another mystery put in the comments by Lakin. So thank you, Lakin, for going into the contest. So chances are very good for you to win, because I I think Jeff has probably read the book already if he doesn't already have it.
He does. He does. I am very blessed. You know, we talk about creativity. Here's another creative story. I'm just going to segue right. You know, I had the pleasure of meeting Jeff at a SHRM conference, a SHRM annual conference, years and years and years ago.
Yep.
And we've since become great colleagues and just tremendous friends. I value Jeff more than I can say, and his beautiful wife, Julie. They're like family to me now.
Well, and he knows Dash, of course.
He knows Dash. Yeah, he knows Dash. There you go. But that's part of creativity, right? Is getting out of our comfort zone.
Yep.
You know, there's no policy that says, and Steve Brown will love this one. Shout out to Steve.
Shout out
that,
to Steve.
You know, I was at this conference and I didn't need a policy to say, thou shalt go and introduce yourself to 5 people you've never met before. You know, and spoiler alert, I'm not too shy. And poor Jeff, who is an introvert, who's a deep thinker. I love the way Jeff thinks and processes things. We're a great team because Jeff thinks and does exactly what I said, be still. And whereas I'm running around, you know, so we good work off each other. But anyway, I see Jeff there standing by himself, thinking, probably being his good introverted self. And I'm like, aha. And my creativity, because I come running to him, hi, who are you? What are you all about? And he's like, oh my gosh. But, you know, and the rest, as they say, is history. And Jeff didn't need a policy to say, okay, I should talk to someone who's, oh my gosh, a Canadian, and we better welcome. Like, we embrace that creative moment, that unplanned, unfiltered moment.
Yeah, and he was on episode 27, so he's a previous guest as well. So if you haven't listened to Jeff's, just go back. Obviously, SpeakEasy HR has all of the episodes, and if you want to get that information, go to speakeasyhr.com. Brand new Word of the Week blog put out today, week 15. The word is purpose. So make sure to go out there and check that out. You can subscribe to get them every week, but you can go in there, find the podcast platforms to listen to Jeff's previous episode or anybody else's that was on before. So we've got, we make a great team. My Peacock sister there.
Jeff likes peacocks too, so that just worked out really well.
There you go. Yeah, they just did a really cool piece on him with SHRM as part of his influencer group at National SHRM. So love that he's getting the shout outs there. So
it's fantastic. Check it out. You'll find it on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It's on X. Make sure you see the video. Yeah.
And
the fantastic work that Jeff's doing too as the director in Wisconsin.
Yes, he's doing awesome work. And he's supposed to be retired, but he's probably busier than most people at work. So keep up the good work there, Jeff. All right. So if you could change one thing about the way HR operates today, what would it be and why?
So I talked a little bit about Wicked, right? I shamelessly love the movie. I'm waiting for part 2, even though I've seen the play. So I do know how it ends. Spoiler alert. But I feel like HR is so much like the wizard. We're behind this curtain. Yep. And people have no idea what we do. And when people don't know, talk about creativity, they invent things. They create this illusion of us going, what policy can I make today that's going to mess everybody up? And how can I, and they have us envisioned as us working for the organization pitted against the employees, which it doesn't have to be an either or. Yeah. But we've got to get out from behind the mystical curtain. Yeah. And, this is not a new theory, the management by walking around. And I talk a lot about this when we talk about change management. The first time an employee sees you should not be on the day when you walk in to give them some bad news of some sort, or when you walk in to tell them, oh, there's a major change coming and this is how it's going to affect you. They could view that as good or bad news, but that's not when they should see you for the first time. Right. Or when you're asking them for something. Okay, we're making this change. We need you to do this. Yep. You need to be someone who they know who you are, even if it's a face to the name. And I know that's difficult sometimes with remote and all. You can still get out there. There's ways to get out and connect with people before they need you or you need them. No, this is no different than I would share with people. please don't connect with me when you need me to be a reference and I haven't heard from you in the last 10 years. One, I don't know what you're doing, but it's rude. It's rude to just connect with someone when you want something from them.
Oh yeah,
So why
exactly.
do we do that in HR?
Yeah.
And then people say to me, "Oh no, people don't want to see HR walking around because they think then something's wrong." And then I've even had it. I was in a situation where unfortunately we laid off many employees, and I'd be walking down the hall and I'd see people shut their doors. They'd see me coming and I'd think, oh, that's not very nice. And I'd be like, oh, I was sad. But what it struck with me is once that phase passed, I would still walk around. And people soon learned I was walking around not to deliver some bad news, and not to spy on them, but to walk around and just say, hi, I'm just walking to the water cooler. Or, oh, I thought I'd walk through this floor or walk around for a bit because I needed to stretch.
Yep.
Hi. And that was it. And oh my gosh, a real human being.
Does it say "I love HR" on your
It
shirt?
sure
Is that what it
does.
says? That's
It
awesome.
sure does. I heart HR, even though it can be murder.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I from my experience, as I have been involved in hiring and recruiting, as I start those conversations with those applicants that turn into a job offer, that turn into a job, I try to connect with them on day 1, and I try to connect with them on day 30 and day 60 and day 90. So after 90 days, they know that I am a resource, my role in the organization and what I'm here for and what I'm here to do and help, but also be a resource for them. And so I have heard, several people be like, "Oh, you're different than HR that I've seen before." And it's like it's good to hear that. I don't expect it, but when people tell me and how they compare me to other HR, in office kind of situations or other organizations they've worked with HR, it shows me that there are organizations that need to do more in how their employees view HR. So yeah, getting out from behind the desk as much as possible and going out and talking to the people and going to the break room and just hearing what people are talking about, because
Yes.
you'll know a lot about the organization if you just sit and ask people questions about how their day's going, how's their job, how are their kids, how's family, just non-work stuff.
Yes. Amen. Oh, amen. Here's my CPHR Alberta.
So there you go.
Yes. And people say to me, well, you can't ask people personal questions. Of course you get within appropriate boundaries.
Yeah.
Again, this reminds me of one of my very first jobs in banking. In the lunchroom, we'd all, sit there, and I was asking one of the managers, I said, oh, I saw a beautiful picture of a young lady in a graduation convocation outfit on your desk.
Yeah.
Who is she and what's that all about? And so he's like, oh, that's my daughter. And he started telling me. I said, oh, lovely. And another employee who I know had been there for years and years and years, turned and looked at him and said, I didn't know you had a daughter. Oh my gosh, what kind of weird world have I entered? But they didn't talk. Nobody talked to each other.
Yeah.
And they said after, when I was leaving, a couple of years later, they said, wow, we're going to miss you in the lunchroom. Nobody said they're going to miss me at work. But they did say they're going to miss me in the lunchroom because,
yeah,
they said it brought a different kind of vibrancy and connection. And, they actually started talking to each other. And, it's okay. And it's okay for us to show we're people too. HR is people too.
HR is human. I put a blog on about 2 weeks ago, and so if you want to read that, it's out in my website, and it's about just people in HR, and I'm thanking them for what they do because they probably don't hear it enough, and that we are human and that we go through a lot, right? So, and as Jeff said, connection should start before day 1. It begins the first contact. Having a phone interview, having and face-to-face or video interview with someone, if you are considering hiring them into your organization, and then it turns into a job offer and you bring them in. And so your job was to hire somebody. Now you did that. Now it's how do you connect with that person? How do you help the manager connect to them and manage them, to the extent of hopefully retaining them and helping them in their career. So HR plays a role in all of that, well beyond just firing people and making policies. And creating a workplace that is creative and innovative, and it's going to constantly change. So everything we're saying today will probably be relevant in the future, but it will change
in a different way, relevant in a different way.
Yeah.
And David, I'll add to that, even when you're first point of contact with someone, even if you don't end up hiring them, it's the impression you've left. You don't know who they know. You don't know if they're a future customer. And one of the creative ideas that I'll leave for our listeners to think about is, I encouraged a client, they love this idea, that when they hired somebody, again, with technology, and they didn't ask to take up too much of their time before they officially started, but there was a welcome video sent from the president of the company to the employee and their family or their friends. They called it to the new employee and your support group. And they said in the video, show this to anybody that's helped you get to where you are now. And in the video, the president said, we appreciate all of you, because we know that this person, they didn't limit to just family in the traditional sense, right? They thought outside the box, because family looks different for everybody. They said, we appreciate you as well, and what you've done. This person who's joining us has asked us to share this with you because you're important to them. So that means I want to say thank you to you for helping them get to where they are. And we're looking forward to having them join us. And they showed a little bit about the company, and, it wasn't tons of time. And it wasn't too tacky, and it was just very authentic. And that was followed by a little gift that arrived at their home, even if it's a coffee mug or, when it comes from a place of genuine appreciation, people get it.
No, that is a really good idea. So if you are listening to this and everything that we've talked about, just kind of evaluate what you're doing right now. If you're involved in hiring or onboarding and working with new hires and working with managers, see how you can maybe change and create a different experience for a new employee on your team, because it might really impact them as an individual on your staff, and it might help you retain them and develop them. So anything that you would like to add before we finish up today?
No, it's, people often say, think outside the box. Okay. And okay, I'm going to be a little creative with that and leave everybody with a different saying. I'm going to take some poetic license with it, David. Think inside the box. Just make the box bigger.
I like that. I have not heard of that one. That's good.
Coming soon to a t-shirt near you. A bumper sticker near you.
I think you're onto something there. Well, good. Well, I appreciate your time. It was a pleasure to have you on, and I learned a lot. Hopefully everybody that listened and tuned in learned as well. Thanks, Jeff. And I would say, Lakin, you are the winner, because I'm pretty sure Jeff knows the work that Dr. Peacock has already done. So if you want to connect with us, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and we'll get you that access for the 30 days of the HR Can Be Murder book. So, again, thank you very much for your time today. I wish you all the best, and let's keep in touch. And you have a great spring. Hopefully the weather gets a little warmer where you are, but this has been awesome to connect, and I've been looking forward to this. So I'm going to be off for a couple of weeks, but I'll be back on in May. Have some exciting guests coming up in May and beyond. So really excited to be bringing more guests in and different solutions, just authentic, unfiltered conversations like we're doing. So hope everybody has a great week, and we'll talk to you real soon. And thanks again.
Thank you, David. Cheers to everybody. Keep on being creative.
Right.